I was crying when my teacher touched me gently, a true infidelity story. I never imagined my life would change so drastically from something that seemed so small at first. That day started like any other, quiet, normal, uneventful. I walked into school, carrying the same heavy backpack, the same routine, and honestly, the same emotional weight I had been dragging for weeks. I wasn't okay, even though I kept pretending to be. Nobody really noticed, until she did. Miss Taylor wasn't like the other teachers. She had this calm, almost motherly energy, the kind that made you feel safe just being around her. She always smiled at everyone, but not in a fake way. It felt real, like she actually cared. Still, she was just my literature teacher. I never thought our paths would cross in any personal way, until that one afternoon. It was after class, and everyone had already left. I had stayed behind to finish an assignment, but honestly, I just didn't want to go home. Miss Taylor noticed. She looked at me for a moment, then asked softly if everything was okay. And that one simple question, "Are you okay?" was all it took for the tears to start. I tried to hide them, to wipe them away quickly, but she didn't turn away. She walked over slowly and just placed her hand gently on my shoulder. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't anything weird. But something about that small act of kindness broke something open inside me. I was crying when my teacher touched me gently, not because of what she did, but because of everything I had been holding in. That quiet moment of comfort shook something loose, something I didn't even realize I had buried so deep. What followed from that moment, though, is where the story takes a turn no one ever expects. Because what I didn't know at the time was that Miss Taylor was carrying secrets of her own. Secrets that had been slowly pulling her life apart behind the scenes. As I started to open up to her, she began opening up to me too. At first, it was little things, her frustrations with life, her struggles in her marriage, but it slowly became clear that there was more pain behind her smile than anyone could see. What happened next blurred the lines between comfort and confusion, between boundaries and brokenness. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some big, scandalous affair. But it was a connection born out of loneliness, hers and mine. And when two broken people reach out to each other, the result can be healing, or it can lead to even deeper wounds. This isn't a story about blame or shame. It's about what happens when people lose their way, and how one moment of vulnerability can change everything. I didn't go looking for love, or confusion, or pain. But somehow, I found all three. And just when I thought the storm had passed, something happened that made me question everything: who I could trust, what really happened, and whether the comfort I found that day was even real at all. Let me know if you'd like to continue the next part of the story or explore ways to script it for visual storytelling. After that day in the classroom, something between us shifted, quietly, almost unspoken. Nothing obvious changed on the outside. She was still Ms. Taylor, the same calm, thoughtful woman standing in front of the chalkboard. I was still just a student trying to make it through each day. But inside, there was this strange sense of connection that neither of us really talked about. It was like we both knew something had happened, but neither of us had the words to explain it. In the days that followed, she started checking in on me more often. A soft smile in the hallway. A longer pause when she asked if I was doing okay. Once, she left a note on my desk with just 4 words: "You are not alone." I kept that note tucked inside my notebook, reading it whenever I felt like falling apart. And honestly, I did feel like falling apart a lot back then. My home life was complicated. My parents barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it usually ended in shouting. I had no one to really talk to. My friends didn't notice I was drifting away, or maybe they just didn't want to deal with it. So when Ms. Taylor saw me, really saw me, it felt like something I had been starving for finally arrived. Her kindness felt like a lifeline. But something about her started to seem a little off too. She looked tired all the time, like she hadn't slept in days. Her smile didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. And one day, I caught her staring out the window during class, completely zoned out. When I asked if everything was okay, she hesitated before saying, "Sometimes people forget teachers are human too." That line stayed with me. One afternoon, she asked me to stay behind after class again. She said she just wanted to talk, but there was a heaviness in the room I couldn't ignore. She spoke in a quiet voice, telling me how her husband barely noticed her anymore, how she felt invisible in her own home. She didn't go into details, but I could hear the pain in every word. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, listening, feeling that strange mix of comfort and confusion start to grow again. Looking back, I think that's when the line really started to blur. We were both reaching for something, understanding, attention, a sense of meaning. But what happens when two broken hearts begin to lean on each other in ways that maybe they shouldn't? Let me know if you'd like to continue the next chapter of the story or shape this into a voiceover-ready script. From the outside, nothing looked unusual. I still went to school every day, sat through classes, walked the same hallways. But inside, things were different, more complicated. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversations, about the way Ms. Taylor opened up to me that day. It was like we had unlocked something in each other, something hidden and raw. And even though nothing had crossed any lines, there was this growing tension, something we both felt but never said out loud. I started noticing the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Not in a romantic way, but more like she was searching for something, maybe understanding, maybe relief. And the more time we spent talking after class, the more our lives began to overlap. I told her about my parents fighting, about how I'd stay up late just to avoid the noise. She told me she used to write poetry before her life got too heavy, before her marriage became a quiet battle of silence. The strange thing was, even though we were both hurting, being around each other didn't always feel like healing, it sometimes felt like walking a tightrope. Every word carried weight. Every pause felt longer than it should. There were days I'd replay our conversations in my head, wondering if I had said too much or read into something that wasn't there. Around this time, one of my classmates, Jenna, started noticing. She asked me why I stayed after class so much, and I shrugged it off. But her curiosity didn't stop. She began making little comments, half joking but sharp. "You and Ms. Taylor getting close, huh?" she'd say with a raised eyebrow. It made me uncomfortable, not because anything inappropriate had happened, but because I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't even fully understand it myself. Then one afternoon, I walked past the teacher's lounge and caught a glimpse of Ms. Taylor inside. She was talking to another teacher, and the way her expression shifted, tense, guarded, it made me wonder if something was going on beyond what I knew. Was someone else beginning to suspect? Or was she hiding more than I realized? There were too many questions and not enough answers. And the more I tried to make sense of it, the more tangled everything became. I kept asking myself if I was just imagining things, or if I had stepped into something far bigger than I was ready for. Let me know if you'd like to continue building the suspense from here or dive deeper into Jenna's role in the unfolding story. Things started spiraling the day I found a folded piece of paper in my locker. No name, no handwriting I recognized, just a short message: "You're not as invisible as you think. Be careful." At first, I thought it was some kind of joke, maybe from Jenna. But the more I looked at it, the more serious it felt. My stomach dropped. Someone knew. Someone was watching. That entire day, I felt like I was moving through a fog. Every glance in the hallway, every whisper behind me, suddenly I couldn't tell what was real and what was just in my head. Ms. Taylor noticed I was off. After class, she asked if I was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her. I just nodded and said I was tired. But inside, I felt something between panic and guilt, like a secret was cracking open whether I wanted it to or not. At home, things weren't any better. My dad had been gone for 2 nights in a row, no explanation. My mom was constantly on edge. I overheard her on the phone late one night, crying quietly and saying, "I don't know how much more of this I can take." That same night, I stared at my ceiling for hours, thinking about Ms. Taylor. Not in a romantic way, but in a confused, twisted kind of way, wondering what she was really feeling, what she wasn't telling me. The next morning at school, Jenna cornered me by the lockers. Her voice was low, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "I saw you with her," she said. After school. I know something's going on. I tried to deny it, but she just stared at me, like she already knew the truth. Or thought she did. She warned me that other people were starting to talk. That it didn't look good. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in from all sides. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Even Ms. Taylor seemed distant lately, more careful, more distracted. One afternoon, she rushed out of class before I could even say hi. Something was definitely wrong. Then, as I was packing up my things, I noticed her phone left on her desk, screen still lit up. A message preview blinked, "We need to talk." He knows. That was the moment everything changed. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the story's climax or explore what happens next with Ms. Taylor's secret. I stared at Ms. Taylor's phone, heart pounding in my chest. The message glowed on the screen, "We need to talk." He knows. I didn't know who he was, but I knew right then that this wasn't just about me anymore. Something bigger was happening, something she hadn't told me. I froze for a second, torn between doing the right thing and following the instincts that had already dragged me too far into her world. Before I could think too much, I quickly locked the screen and walked away like nothing had happened. But inside, everything was spinning. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept running in circles. Who had sent that message? Her husband? Another teacher? Was someone watching us the whole time? And what exactly did he know? I thought back to every after-class conversation, every glance exchanged, every moment that might have looked suspicious from the outside. Maybe this connection that had felt so private wasn't so private after all. The next day, Ms. Taylor wasn't at school. No message, no warning. Just a substitute sitting in her chair, reading off lesson plans like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. I tried asking around casually, but nobody seemed to know where she was. Even Jenna seemed confused, and that made things worse. If someone like her didn't know, then whatever had happened must have been serious. After school, I found myself wandering into the library, hoping for some kind of distraction. But as I passed by the front office, I caught a glimpse of something: two school board members talking in hushed voices with the principal. One of them was holding a folder with Ms. Taylor's name on the tab. I knew I shouldn't have been there, but I couldn't move. I stood just close enough to hear a few words: investigation, inappropriate boundaries, and worst of all, student. My stomach dropped. Somehow, I had become part of something official. Something real. And I wasn't ready for it. That night, things got even more intense. Around 10 p.m., I got a message from an unknown number. No greeting. Just one sentence: "Meet me behind the school tomorrow. 4 p.m. Don't bring anyone." There was no name, but I knew. It had to be her. By now, my emotions were tangled: fear, guilt, anger, confusion. Part of me wanted to walk away from it all. But another part needed to know the truth. What had I really been pulled into? Why was she suddenly disappearing? And who else had gotten involved without me knowing? The stakes had changed. This wasn't just about a teacher and a student anymore. It was about secrets, trust, and something darker unfolding behind the scenes. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. And somehow, I knew the next day would bring answers, or more damage. Let me know if you'd like to keep the momentum going into the next turning point or explore what the secret meeting reveals. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. My hands were cold, my stomach felt twisted, and the only thing running through my mind was that message: "Meet me behind the school. Don't bring anyone." Every minute dragged like an hour until the clock finally hit 3:50. I slipped out of the building quietly and made my way toward the back lot where the old benches sat, half hidden by tall trees and a rusty chain-link fence. The air felt different, still, like it was holding its breath. She was already there. Miss Taylor stood with her back to me, arms crossed, hair pulled up like she hadn't even had time to think about it. When she turned around, her face looked tired, but not scared. More like someone who had already made peace with something. She motioned for me to sit. I shouldn't have asked you to come, she said quietly. But I didn't know who else I could trust. I waited, heart thudding in my chest. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "Someone reported me. There's an official complaint, they think something happened between us." I swallowed hard. Did it? She shook her head, eyes clear. No. But sometimes perception becomes truth. And the truth is, I did rely on you more than I should have. I was lonely. And you were kind. I blurred lines I shouldn't have. I didn't know what to say. There was pain in her voice, but also honesty. She wasn't trying to escape responsibility, she was facing it. But before I could respond, a noise from behind the fence made both of us jump. Someone was there. I turned quickly, just in time to see a phone being pulled back from the gap. Someone had been recording us. We both stood up, but it was too late. Whoever it was had already run off. She turned to me, eyes wide. They're going to twist this into something it's not. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The message in my locker. The rumors. Jenna. But then, the folder. That conversation in the office. What if it hadn't been about her? What if it had been about me? Later that evening, I checked my messages again. Another one came in from an unknown number. She wasn't the only one under investigation. Be careful who you talk to. My chest tightened. That was the twist I hadn't seen coming. Maybe this wasn't just about Miss Taylor. Maybe someone had been using our connection to cover up something else entirely. A distraction. And I was caught right in the middle. The truth is, we both got too close. But someone else was watching the whole time, using our story as a shield. And now, I had no idea who to trust anymore, not even myself. Let me know if you'd like to explore the final reveal or possible ending twist or turn this into a full series arc. In the days that followed, everything moved fast. Ms. Taylor didn't return to school, and rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she was fired. Others said she left on her own. But no one knew the full story. Not even me. All I knew was that something deeper had been going on behind the scenes, something I had only scratched the surface of. After the message warning me to be careful, I started paying closer attention. I noticed how certain teachers avoided eye contact with me. How the principal kept glancing my way during assemblies. One afternoon, I was called into the counselor's office. They said it was just a check-in. But the way they asked questions, casual, but too specific, told me there was more to it. They weren't just worried about my well-being. They were fishing for something. That's when it clicked. Maybe I wasn't the only student they were watching. Maybe Ms. Taylor wasn't the only teacher they were questioning. Whatever this was, it went beyond our story. It was a web of assumptions, cover-ups, and quiet power plays. And we had both become easy targets in a system that didn't know how to deal with quiet pain and human mistakes. I never heard from Miss Taylor again. No goodbye. No closure. But a week later, I opened my notebook and found her old notes still tucked inside. "You are not alone." It hit differently now. Not as comfort, but as a reminder. That people carry their own stories, silent, heavy, misunderstood. We had both been looking for something. Support. Connection. A way to feel seen. Maybe we found it for a while. But not in a way that could last. Jenna stopped bothering me after that. Maybe she realized she'd pushed too far. Or maybe she was just caught off guard when everything turned out to be more complicated than she expected. Either way, I didn't blame her. We were all just trying to figure things out, each in our own broken way. Looking back, it wasn't about love or betrayal. It was about loneliness. About how sometimes, when people are hurting, they reach out without realizing how far they've stretched. And sometimes, others are reaching too, just as unsure, just as lost. The whole experience changed me. It taught me how fragile trust is, how easily it can be misunderstood or manipulated. But it also made me realize how important it is to listen, to really listen, before making judgments. Because behind every story, there's more than what we see. Now, I walk those same school halls with a little more caution and a lot more awareness. I'm not the same person I was. And I don't think I ever will be again. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Sometimes, the moments that shake us the most are the ones that wake us up. Let me know if you'd like to adapt this story into a full short film format or build a new story with a similar emotional arc and fire title. I was crying when my teacher touched my soul. A true story of trust and secrets. Broken Heart Books Memo Description. Clapperboard. Welcome to a powerful and emotional true story that will touch your heart and leave you thinking deeply about trust, boundaries, and human connection. This isn't just a student-teacher story, it's a reflection of how loneliness, misunderstanding, and silent struggles can lead to unexpected turns. Open book. Sparkles light bulb. In this video, you'll watch heavy checkmark a student's emotional journey through school pressure, home troubles, and finding comfort in an unexpected place. Heavy checkmark a teacher battling her own silent struggles while trying to support someone who reminded her of herself. Heavy checkmark a web of misunderstanding, rumors, and the emotional cost of crossing invisible boundaries. Heavy checkmark a shocking twist that turns the entire story upside down. Heavy checkmark a reflection on healing, trust, and how moments of connection can change lives forever. Magnifying glass. Tilted left. Key themes and keywords covered in this story. White heavy checkmark emotional student-teacher bond. White heavy checkmark true story of misunderstanding. White heavy checkmark high school drama and real feelings. White heavy checkmark student mental health and loneliness. White heavy checkmark powerful storytelling with plot twists. White heavy checkmark life lesson about trust and perception. White heavy checkmark school life reality and hidden truths. White heavy checkmark story about personal growth and change. White heavy checkmark human connection and emotional healing. White heavy checkmark realistic drama without crossing limits. Performing arts. What makes this story different? This isn't about scandal or headlines. This is about emotions that often go unnoticed. It's a raw, real-life inspired story that handles sensitive topics with respect, depth, and honesty, while following all of YouTube's guidelines. Pushpin. Every moment is written to reflect real human experience, confusion, guilt, kindness, fear, and transformation. It's a story many can relate to but few ever talk about. Loudspeaker. Why you should watch this story. Small orange diamond. If you've ever felt invisible, misunderstood, or trapped between right and wrong, this video is for you. Small orange diamond. If you enjoy emotional storytelling with strong characters and real consequences, you won't want to miss this. Small orange diamond. If you love suspense, plot twists, and drama with meaning, this will stay with you long after it ends. Small orange diamond. And if you're searching for student-teacher stories with a deep emotional core, told respectfully, this is your destination. Chart. Increasing trending keywords. This video covers hashtag true story, hashtag student life, hashtag teacher student bond, hashtag emotional story, hashtag high school drama, hashtag mental health, hashtag school secrets, hashtag trust issues, hashtag life lessons, hashtag Hindi storytelling, hashtag real life inspired, hashtag plot twist story, hashtag respectful narrative, hashtag boundaries and emotions. Pushpin. Chapters of this story. Timestamps. Midnight. Introduction. A cry no one heard. 2:15. The first conversation that changed everything. 5:30. Secrets start to unfold. 8:10. Rumors and notes that made everything worse. 11:45. The twist. It was never just about us. 14:20. Meeting in secret. Searching for truth. 1800 hours. The real conflict begins. 22:05. Final message. Be careful who you trust. 2400 hours. 30. The climax. Everything falls apart. 28:00. A quiet ending and a lasting lesson. Folded hands. Disclaimer. This story is a work of creative storytelling inspired by real emotional struggles people face in student life. No actual names, places, or individuals are involved. The story respects YouTube's guidelines and avoids any harmful or inappropriate content. Speech balloon. Comment below. What would you have done in this situation? Have you ever found comfort in an unexpected place? Let's talk in the comments. Backhand index pointing down. Thumbs up. Like this video if the story moved you. Bell. Subscribe for more powerful true stories and emotional content. Outbox. Stray. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Headphones. Stay tuned for more stories that heal, reveal, and stay real. Speech balloon. Because sometimes, stories say what words can't. Blue Heart YouTube tags, SEO optimized, 500 plus words true story, emotional story, student-teacher story, touching story, Hindi kahani, real story, teacher bond, emotional connection, life-changing story, school life, student struggle, true school story, high school drama, motivational story, sad story, crying story, relationship boundaries, mental health story, life lesson, powerful story, heart-touching story, trust and betrayal, suspense story, inspirational video, emotional journey, storytelling in Hindi, Hindi storytelling, voiceover story, viral story, heartwarming story, misunderstood relationships, student life problems, school rumors, real life-based story, unexpected twist, dramatic story, relatable story, self-discovery, psychological story, human emotions, student confession, teacher advice, inspirational student story, intense drama, moral story, Hindi voiceover story, plot twist story, trending story, YouTube kahani, Hindi audio story, YouTube viral story, powerful Hindi story. Teacher support story, motivational storytelling, character development story, mature storytelling, Hindi kahaniya, kahani emotional, school emotional story, daily life story, real school experience, realistic storytelling, youth story, life challenges, Hindi inspirational story, emotional plot, student emotional life, trust issues story, school relationship story, Hindi drama story, deep emotional video, relatable student story, boundary story, unexpected school story, Hindi emotional. Voiceover, YouTube story content, moral learning story, tearful story, crying emotional video, story with lesson, meaningful story, real feeling story, touchy content, Hindi school story, secret revealed story, school scandal avoided story, safe YouTube story, YouTube student drama, student love misunderstanding, honest storytelling, emotional bonding, Hindi voice story, teacher life story, YouTube approved story, meaningful Hindi story, reflection story, thought-provoking story, deep voiceover story, Hindi emotional narration, life lesson for youth, Hindi youth story, viral emotional story, trending Hindi video, teacher helping student, real drama story, classroom drama, touching school story, moral-based story, teen emotional story, school memory story, YouTube viral Hindi kahani, student diary story, heartfelt story Hindi, YouTube Hindi kahani video artist palette photo prompt, a soft-lit portrait of an American woman in her early 30s, standing beside a large classroom window during golden hour. Her expression is gentle yet thoughtful, with a hint of sadness in her eyes. She wears a modest blouse with a cardigan, her light brown hair loosely tied back. The warm sunlight falls across her face, creating a soft, emotional glow. The classroom behind her is slightly blurred, with a few books and papers on the desk, evoking a calm, reflective mood. The overall tone is cinematic and emotional, with natural soft lighting and a shallow depth of field. 1.